In a small, unremarkable house at the very edge of town, where the grass grew wild and the air was filled with the whispers of gossip and curiosity, there stood an ordinary-looking door. This door led to an ordinary room, or so it seemed. However, when 10-year-old Ben first stepped inside, his heart raced as if it was trying to leap out of his chest. A deep shiver crawled up his spine, slithering like a snake, and made his skin prickle. It was not just the clutter of worn-out boxes and forgotten toys that filled the space. What truly frightened him was the unsettling sensation that something was terribly off, something was lurking just out of sight. The room felt unnatural. The walls appeared to pulse softly, inhaling and exhaling like a living creature. Ben couldn't shake the feeling that the house was somehow aware of him, watching him with unseen eyes. The shadows in the corners danced and twisted in a way that made him think they were reaching for him, stretching out as if they wanted to ensnare him in their cold embrace. Ben felt a mix of attraction and dread. Adventure always awaited him, but sometimes it came with unexpected twists. Ben was a curious boy, renowned in his neighborhood for his fearless exploration of the hidden nooks and crannies of his home. He often rummaged through forgotten drawers, peering into dusty corners, excitedly seeking treasures and secrets buried in dust and darkness. His mother, with her warm smile and wise eyes, often warned him about wandering too far into uncharted territories. She would say, "Ben, you never know what's out there." But he would chuckle at her worries, his laughter bubbling up like a tiny fountain. A twinge of mischief danced in his bright blue eyes as he eagerly pushed the heavy wooden door open. To Ben, life was like a great adventure book where every nook had a tale to tell, filled with heroes and hidden treasures. But this room, the one he now stood in, felt different, almost like a trap waiting to ensnare him. As he glanced around, the atmosphere in the room thickened, almost tangibly, like fog rolling in from the sea. Ben noticed that the room looked like a jumble of childhood memories left scattered and forgotten. A faded teddy bear sat forlornly in the corner, its stitched smile barely visible. A jagged pile of magazines lay scattered under the window, their pages yellowed and curling at the edges, while a rusty bicycle frame lurked against the wall, sadness clinging to it like a cobweb. Yet, something was not right. The stillness was suffocating, heavy with the weight of unwelcome secrets. The moment he turned to inspect the teddy bear, he could have sworn it seemed to inch closer. The once soft fur appeared more matted and worn, and his heart skipped a beat as he blinked, unsure if he was imagining things or if the very essence of the room was shifting and changing around him. Suddenly, a deep groan echoed from the walls, a sound that reverberated through his bones and made him shiver. It was a noise so guttural that it felt like the house itself was alive, filled with a terrible consciousness. The grotesque silence filled the space after the groan, heavy and foreboding, suggesting that something was stirring just behind the flat surfaces, waiting and watching. Ben took a hesitant step backward, feeling the usual buoyancy of his adventurous spirit dampen under the weight of dread. Just as he thought of escaping, the door he had entered through vanished behind him with an ominous creak, as if the very house had swallowed it up. He spun around, bewildered, and discovered that a smooth wall stood in place of the doorway, without a hint of where it had been. Panic began to swell in his chest, tightening like a noose around his heart. "Stay calm," he muttered to himself, his voice tiny and shaky, though the tremor in his words betrayed his bravado. He pressed against the wall, feeling for any cracks or gaps that might hint at a way out. But the surface was solid and unyielding, mocking him in his plight, as if the house knew his panic and found it terribly amusing. He began to knock, desperate to draw attention, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear him. Each thud against the foreboding wall sent vibrations ringing through the air, creating unexpected echoes that bounced back toward him, sounding eerily like laughter, but it wasn't his laughter. As the dark shadows pulled closer, Ben felt a prickling sensation crawl up the back of his neck, as though unseen eyes were watching him, judging him. His pulse raced, fighting against the encroaching dread that enveloped him like a thick fog. He was not alone. The unmistakable feeling of being hunted seeped into his mind, pooling fearfully in the corners of his imagination. Something sinister lurked in the dim recesses of this forsaken space, something frighteningly alive that seemed to snarl and shift, like a predator lying in wait. In a wild burst of desperation, he turned to find another way out, his wide eyes darting around the room like a trapped bird. A flicker of movement caught his attention. Over in the dim far corner, what looked like a jagged crack exuded an eerie cold glow. It was faint, but it shimmered with a strange invitation, enticing him toward it. Could this be a way out? Or an entrance to further horrors? With a surge of hope and trepidation racing through him, Ben dashed toward it, his heart thundering like the drums of war. But just as he reached the light, the room changed again in a horrifying instant. The walls shivered and contorted, the floorboards creaked underneath him, groaning in a way that echoed his fear back at him. The space seemed to swallow the very essence of the air around him, tightening with a ravenous hush, as if it was consuming his breaths. In place of the jagged crack, now stood a wooden door, but it was smudged with remnants of something dark and foul. It looked ancient and mysterious, like it had not been opened in many, many years. Ben hesitated, his heart in his throat, a rush of foreboding washing over him like icy water. Should he dare to open a new door that might lead to even more horrors? A twisted part of him thought it would be better than standing there, suffocating in silence, trapped in a place that felt utterly wrong. Just as he grasped the rusted handle, a voice swept through the air, chilling as ice. "You can leave, but you must play first." The sound was horrid, demonic, and disembodied, threading through his mind like poison, each word stabbing deeper into his heart. Ben froze, paralyzed by the weight of uncertainty, the gnawing fear surging like a wave within him. There was a maze within the very confines of this room, a terrifying game that had ensnared countless before him. The shadows thickened, crawling along the walls and floor like hungry beasts closing in for the catch. It was unmistakable now. He sensed he was caught in a sinister game where he was both the player and the prey. His breath quickened, sweat trickling down his brow as he contemplated his next move. The air was thick with tension, and the strange voice faded slowly, leaving an unsettling silence that pressed against his ears. Ben forced himself to think clearly, as he wiped his sweaty palms against his jeans, trying to gather courage. If he had to play to escape, he at least needed to understand the rules of this game. What did it mean? What would it ask of him? "Who are you? What kind of game is this?" he called out, his voice wavering but echoing into the darkened corners of the room. The shadows stirred momentarily, but then fell silent again. Ben waited, ears straining for a reply, but only the miserable silence returned. It felt like a long, heavy pause, and the uncertainty gnawed at him like a hungry mouse. With anxiety flooding his veins, he turned once more to the door. There had to be something on the other side. He could not let fear consume him. He had to be brave and see this through. He took a deep breath, tasting the stale air that filled the room, and turned the rusty handle slowly. The door creaked open, revealing more darkness beyond, as if the darkness itself was waiting for him, hungry and expectant. "Step forward if you dare, little boy," the voice echoed again, but this time it was softer, almost enticing. The shadows flickered anxiously, beckoning him closer. Ben clenched his fists, summoning a shred of courage to step into the unknown. As he took his first step through the threshold, a strange force seemed to tug him in, pulling him deeper into the black void that lay beyond the door. He could not turn back now. Intrigue, fear, and a deep sense of adventure propelled him forward. What awaited him was yet to be seen, but Ben was determined to uncover the mystery that lay ahead, unaware of the profound and terrifying journey that awaited him in this unsettling game of darkness and light. Little did he know, the real game was just beginning, and the shadows were eager for a player of their own. When the eerie voice faded into an unsettling silence, Ben stood frozen like a statue in a museum, unable to decide what to do next. His heart pounded loudly in his chest, thump thump thumping like a drummer in a parade, while the shadows around him danced with a mischievous energy. It felt as if they were having fun teasing him, poking fun at his fear and uncertainty. Sweat ran down his forehead, trickling into his eyes, as he turned around to survey the room. It was as if it was alive and breathing, twisting and changing shape as if to make him uncomfortable. The first door he had seen was now gone, vanished like a magician's trick, and in its place were strange symbols carved into the walls. The symbols looked like they were pulsing, glowing softly like little fireflies, appearing as if they were watching him, judging him. Ben could hear whispers around him, soft as the rustling of leaves but filled with a sinister meaning. It was as if there was something, or someone, lurking just out of sight, waiting for him to make a mistake. He could feel a strong urge to escape, growing inside him like a heavy weight. Clenching his fists tightly, he marched forward, stepping through a newly formed door as if it were a gateway to another world. Deep down inside, he knew it might be a trap, but staying still felt even scarier. "Just keep moving," he whispered fiercely to himself, trying to sound brave. The wicked shadows would not catch him if he stayed alert and quick on his feet. The door led him into a narrow hallway that seemed to twist and turn like a snake, curling into deeper and darker places. The air became thick and hard to breathe, smelling foul and disgusting, like something that had been forgotten in the back of a refrigerator for too long. Ben's heart raced as he turned instinctively, navigating through the maze. With each corner he rounded, he felt as though he was losing his sense of direction, as if the room was spinning in a dizzying dance. In the dim light, the walls seemed to breathe, moving in and out like a sleeping giant, matching the rapid rhythm of his terrified heartbeat. Panic set in and grew heavy in his stomach as Ben stumbled upon old portraits, their faces warped and twisted, staring back at him with eerie smiles and hollow eyes. The portraits seemed to flicker, as if they were trying to tell him something, whispering secrets of sorrow and sadness lost to time. They drew him in, inviting him to come closer. A cold shiver crawled up his spine, and he felt a chilling realization. He was not just moving through the room. He was becoming a part of its darkness, a piece of the horror that surrounded him. Louder whispers joined the soft rustling, blending together into a haunting lullaby that hung heavily in the air around him. It felt like the very shadows were calling to him, inviting him deeper into their wicked embrace. With every step he took, the labyrinth wrapped itself around him tighter and tighter, as if trying to swallow him whole. His legs felt heavy, as if the shadows themselves were trying to hold him in place, making it difficult to move forward. Desperation clawed at his throat, tightening like a noose, yet he pressed on, determined to find a way out. Suddenly, he spotted something ghastly in the distance. A distorted mirror with jagged edges, much like a piece of broken glass. The surface shimmered with a dull light that pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing him closer with each step he took. Dark, gooey substance dripped from the mirror, pooling ominously on the floor. As he approached, the reflection began to change and warp. Faces flashed before his eyes, twisted and agonizing, haunting him with horrific images of memories he didn't recognize. Taking a cautious step closer, he was intrigued yet terrified. The mirror's surface rippled and shimmered, desperately revealing twisted faces of other children, all pressing against the glass, their eyes wide with terror and longing, pleading for help. A chill gripped Ben's heart as he recognized one of the faces, a boy from school who had gone missing just a few weeks ago. The air grew sour, and Ben recoiled, feeling a storm of emotions swirling within him, fear, sadness, and anger roiling like a turbulent sea. "Help us!" Their voices merged into a single haunting call, drawing him into their despair. The shadows grew thicker and closed around him, feeling heavy on his chest. He staggered back, realizing that the labyrinth was feeding off his fear, wanting to devour him completely. Panic swept through him. He needed to escape, but where could he go? He turned, glancing back down the hallway, only to find it transformed. Suddenly, there were many new doors, each one looking just as uninviting and creepy as the last. With no time to waste, he chose the nearest door, shoving it open with shaky hands. As he stepped inside, nausea hit him like a wave, and the room spun violently before his eyes. He found himself in a twisted version of a child's playroom. It looked almost like the playroom he had when he was little, but everything was wrong. Toys lay scattered around, broken and misshapen, while dolls with cracked faces seemed to stare at him, their once cheerful smiles now twisted into sinister grins. The walls seemed to warp and bend, pulling in and out, taunting him, as if reality itself was laughing at his misfortune. As the door slammed shut behind him with a loud bang, panic shot through his body. The room felt as though it were growing tighter around him, the walls inching closer, shadows lurking and swirling in every corner, hungry and eager to consume him. He took a deep breath and stepped further into the horrifying realm, every sound around him echoing ominously, whispers curling at the edges of his thoughts, trying to fill him with dread. In a corner of the room, Ben spotted a broken toy chest. It lay half open, its contents spilling out like secrets long forgotten. Some of the toys looked like they had once been alive, with bright colors and smiles, but they were now faded and cracked. A tattered teddy bear, missing an eye, observed him with a twisted expression, while a raggedy, once cheerful puppet hung limply from the edge, its strings tangled like the emotions tumbling around in Ben's mind. With trembling hands, he knelt down to the floor, wanting to put the pieces back together, aching to restore some sense of normalcy. Yet as he reached for a bright red ball, it rolled away from him, continuing its path without stopping. It rolled across the room, coming to rest against the wall where shadows cloaked everything in darkness. Ben felt a jolt of fear race through him. What if the shadows were mocking him, playing a cruel game? He watched the ball sit still for a moment, almost daring him to follow. With his heart racing, Ben forced himself to stand, pressing on despite the suffocating pressure around him. With every step deeper into the room, he felt like he was losing a little piece of himself, his courage, his hope, and his sense of safety. The whispers grew fainter, but the looming dread remained, wrapping itself around him like a thick fog. He moved further inward, the shadows dancing and shifting like dark waves breaking against a shore. Suddenly, Ben could hear laughter, a harsh, cruel sound echoing through the walls. It set his nerves on fire. Was it the shadows laughing at him? Were they enjoying his fear? He pressed his hand against the wall, trying to ground himself, but it felt slippery, and he pulled back, shaking. Then, he noticed something peeking from behind a curtain that hung limply against the wall. Curiosity sparked inside him, urging him forward. With cautious steps, he approached and pulled aside the heavy fabric, revealing a small alcove. In the center of the alcove stood an old, dusty box, adorned with strange markings similar to those etched into the walls. It felt ancient, beckoning him closer, whispering secrets only it knew. Taking a deep breath, he lifted the lid, and a rush of cold air swept over him, as if the box were a portal to another world. Inside lay a quaint collection of items, a marionette, a once beautiful music box, and a faded locket. As he picked up the locket, he felt its weight in his hand, heavy with stories untold. The cold metal was smooth against his skin, almost comforting despite the creepiness of the room. He held the locket between his fingers, trembling slightly. As he opened it, a soft, golden light emanated from within, casting flickers of warmth against the chilling shadows. Pictures of smiling children filled the locket, their faces shining with happiness, oblivious to the darkness that surrounded him now. This was proof that light once existed here, and perhaps it still could. He felt a glimmer of hope, a tiny spark igniting within him, something he had thought lost forever. Ben could hear the laughter again, closing in from all sides, but the golden light from the locket pushed back against the darkness. "You cannot have me," he shouted defiantly, holding the locket tightly. The laughter faded for a moment, replaced by a low growl, almost like frustration that he had found a piece of joy in this gloomy place. The shadows shrank back slightly, sensing the strength within Ben, feeling the warmth that radiated from the locket. With renewed courage, Ben stepped away from the box, the locket clasped firmly in his hand. "I will escape this maze," he proclaimed, louder this time, feeling a pride buzz in his chest. The walls may have wanted to squeeze him, the shadows may have whispered terrifying secrets, but he would not let them win. The creeping panic that had once consumed him began to ease, and he knew he must keep moving forward. As he left the alcove behind, the walls seemed to shift, but he remained focused on finding a way out of this nightmarish place. The memory of the smiling children in the locket fueled his determination. He was not just a wandering soul in the maze. He was brave, courageous, and willing to battle the darkness. Ben took another step, ready to face whatever awaited him, knowing that he would find a way through the maze of shadows. He would find a path that would lead him to freedom, and he would return to the light. The playroom, once a whimsical place in Ben's mind, now turned into a realm where fear took shape. Bright colors that used to dance across the walls were now muted and dull, as if a cloud of sadness had crept in and settled over everything. Grotesque dolls with cloying, painted smiles lay scattered across the stained carpet. Some were missing limbs, their porcelain faces cracked or chipped, while others had glassy eyes that seemed to follow him wherever he moved. It was as if they were alive, watching him with an eerie curiosity. Their mouths moved, yet no sound escaped. Ben knew, deep down, that they felt something strange. They craved life, a twisted parody of childhood he desperately wanted to escape. The air thickened around him, becoming heavier and more constricted with each passing moment. The living room twisted around him, morphing into a cruel mimicry of laughter he couldn't shake off. It felt like the walls were creeping closer, like a giant monster was ready to envelop him. Ben could sense that time had lost its meaning in this dreadful space. Seconds turned into minutes, and minutes felt like hours as shadows lunged closer, stretching out their tendrils in a dance of terror. He moved cautiously through the clutter of broken dreams, desperately seeking another door, a way out, a route that might deliver him from this nightmare. Every corner of the room seemed filled with memories, some joyful, some painful. Broken toys lay in a forgotten corner, their happy days long gone, now just remnants of what once was. A teddy bear lost its stuffing, while a jigsaw puzzle was scattered like shattered hopes. The chaos of his surroundings began to blend into an unsettling hum, a rhythmic echo mimicking the pulse of his fear, its chilly breath brushing against his skin. At the far end of the room loomed a closet, its doors ajar, a dark void peering back at him. The darkness within seemed to swallow the light whole, engulfing it like a hungry beast. Curiosity battled with terror inside Ben's mind as the whispers of his missing classmates urged him onward, beckoning him closer. The room appeared to await his choice, suffused with a palpable dread that threatened to crush him. "I need to keep going," he thought, shaking off the instinct to flee. His feet felt heavy, yet he pressed on, determined to face whatever horror lay ahead. As he approached the closet, a frigid air seeped out, unsettling enough to instill a creeping dread inside his bones. He hesitated for a moment, looking back at the playroom, unsure if he should turn around. But the whispers grew louder, as if encouraging him to embrace the unknown. Slowly, trembling hands reached out, grasping the edges of the closet doors, and with a deep breath, he opened them wider. What he saw horrified him. The closet revealed a putrid interior lined with shapes huddled together, trying desperately to remain unseen. Shattered hangers dangled like broken dreams, and moth-eaten clothes swayed softly despite the absence of wind. Everything seemed haunted. A chilling wail echoed from inside, a sound so foreign and guttural it could only belong to those cursed to dwell within. It was a cry of agony, of despair, of something that had been trapped for far too long. Fear clawed at Ben's throat, but he felt drawn to the haunting sound. The roles of predator and prey blurred in his mind, tightening the invisible hold that trapped him here. Driven by an inexplicable force, he ventured inside, feeling the swarm of shadows envelop him as he crossed the threshold. Instantly, the closet closed around him, an embrace that felt suffocating, like a thick fog that wrapped itself tighter and tighter. Inside, darkness thickened and surged, vibrating ominously as forms began to materialize all around him. Twisted figures with jagged edges emerged, grotesque and malformed, their mouths gaping wide in a manner too unholy to comprehend. Ben stumbled back, struggling to breathe, feeling the weight of their malice pressing down on him. It was like being trapped in a nightmare that refused to end. But it was then that he felt a flicker of hope, a shimmering light at the back of the closet that beckoned him. It glimmered like a star in the night sky, promising safety and escape. Was there a way out? He thought fervently. The figures loomed closer, their gnarled fingers stretching out toward him, but he was drawn to that light. Mustering every ounce of courage he could find, Ben raced toward it, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. Just as he reached out to grasp the light, the figures lunged with terrifying speed, elongating their limbs in a ravenous screech. The harmony of their screams filled the air, each one absorbing pieces of his essence, dragging him deeper into their chaotic dance as they wrapped around him. The shadows seemed to whisper dark secrets, luring him further into despair while filling him with the icy grip of dread. With every second that passed, Ben fought tooth and nail against the onslaught, his heart pounding in a frantic rhythm. A jagged edge beneath him caught his foot, sending him crashing to the floor like a fallen leaf in the wind. Desperation turned to panic, and he sought to push himself back upright. The darkness coiled around his ankles, urging him down into the putrid abyss, an inviting grasp that sought to drown him beneath layers of torment and sorrow. "Help!" he screamed, the sound bursting forth with all his fear and pain. The cry was raw and filled with anguish, breaking through the cacophony for but a moment before dissolving into the shadows. He was spiraling into the depths, flames of despair licking at his sanity, as though the darkness tried to swallow him whole. The figures continued their demonic dance around him, overlapping and converging upon his fragile form, and he felt so small, so utterly powerless against their twisted forms. A shadowy existence beckoned, a cruel finale to his fate, enticing him into eternal gloom. But in that instant of despair, Ben began to think of brighter things. In one last desperate attempt to break free from this harrowing nightmare, he lunged toward the light, feeling shimmering heat coursing through his veins as he did. In that fleeting moment, clarity broke through the spiraling chaos in his mind. An image of his house flickered alive once more, of the cozy kitchen with the warm smell of cookies baking, of his mother calling him for dinner, of his little sister giggling over a game, the mundane bliss of a content childhood before shadows and darkness invaded his thoughts. But as quickly as that brief reprieve set in, the light blinked, revealing a pit of despair that awaited him willingly. The shadows grew more enraged, swirling around him like a storm, their whispers turning into shouts, shouting at him for daring to dream of escaping. "Foolish boy," they seemed to chant, "you cannot leave this place." He felt the tightening grasp of those around him, like hands made of smoke wrapping around his wrists, pulling him down into the darkness below. Strand by strand, his reality began to unravel, as the shadows began to consume pieces of his mind, drawing him further away from thoughts of home, of laughter, and of love. As he floated further into their abyss, the fleeting memories began to fade. The furious whispers echoed endlessly in the cavern of his mind. He could hear laughter mixed with cries, joyous moments blending into sorrowful melodies, creating a symphony of fear and despair. He could feel himself slipping from reality, trapped and powerless under their tightening grasp. But just when despair threatened to take complete control, Ben remembered something very important: he wasn't alone. He still had the fierce love of his family deep inside him, and so he also remembered the words of his mother, always telling him to be brave, to be strong. That tiny flicker of hope reignited in his heart, growing into a flame that pushed against the darkness. "No," Ben shouted against the tide of shadows, refusing to let them take his joy. "You won't take me." With renewed strength, he focused on the light, concentrating hard on the warmth and brightness it promised. Determined, he fought back against the encroaching darkness, feeling his fear transform into courage. He pushed his way through the grasping shadows and lunged for the shimmering light, his heart racing like the beating of wings. As he reached the light, a surge of energy flooded through him, scalding and bright. It pushed the shadows away, scattering them like leaves in the wind. In that instant, he broke free from their grasp, propelled into the light, each second feeling like a precious eternity until he found himself tumbling back out of the closet and onto the floor of the playroom. Gasping for breath, Ben lay on the floor, blinking against the brightness of the room. The eerie dolls were lifeless once again, their cloying smiles replaced by angelic faces obscured by shadows. The corners of the room no longer felt as if they were closing in. It was as if some great weight had been lifted, and the air around him was sweet with the scent of freedom. Wiping away the tears that stung his eyes, he finally stood up and gathered his bearings. The playroom was just a room, after all, a place filled with toys and happiness. He knew that could be real with enough bravery to break through the darkness whenever it threatened to overwhelm him. And with every small brave step forward, Ben realized he could turn his fears into something he could control, something he could conquer. And though there would always be shadows lurking on the edges of his mind, he now knew that the light of hope was much stronger. With renewed determination, Ben smiled lightly at the now traditional toys, realizing they didn't scare him, but reminded him of how far he would fight to safeguard his heart. Time lost all meaning as Ben surrendered to the embrace of the shadows. It felt like he was drifting in a thick, heavy fog, where every second stretched into something endless. His body felt heavier and heavier, weighed down by a terrible sadness that seeped into his very bones. As he was swallowed by the dark, he felt as if he were being wrapped in a deep, cold blanket that squeezed tighter with every breath he took. The air around him felt heavy and thick, making it hard to breathe. The very presence of darkness felt alive, as if it surrounded him with sinister arms, cradling him in a world that had turned completely dark. Yet beneath the bleak and all-consuming blackness, other sounds began to fill the air. Low moans floated around him, like whispers of those who had come before, a mingling of voices that echoed his own despair. Every moment felt like a lifetime spent trapped in this dark and dreadful place. Familiar faces, faces from memories long faded, flickered across his mind like shadows getting lost in the dark. Each face looked tired, worn down, forever begging him for release, for freedom, for company in their eternal night. "Join us," they sighed, their voices raspy as if they had long ago lost the ability to speak with warmth. Instead, they coiled around him, like ghostly fingers beckoning from all directions. The laughter that once brought him joy, had turned sour in his ears. The sound twisted into something cruel and mocking, echoing through the shadows. Ben could feel it deep in his heart. It felt as if they were daring him to embrace the darkness. They wanted him to give in, to turn away from the light and join the dreadful chorus of sorrow. As the room thickened with despair, Ben's spirit flickered. He felt himself being hunted, prey to shadows that craved his modern vitality and warmth. With a shudder, he realized he might not be alone in this prison of despair. Shapes moved around him as shadows morphed and twisted into grotesque figures. They were not just wisps of blackness, they took on forms that made his stomach turn. The sight was dreadful. He caught glimpses of eerie faces that seemed to be staring blankly, hollowed eyes glistening with unshed tears of hopelessness. Most terrifying of all were the faces of children. These were once bright, joyful souls who had wandered into this accursed place, only to be trapped forever. Their once vibrant spirits dimmed. What remained was an echo of laughter mixed with an underlying current of sorrow. As his heart raced with dread and confusion, he wondered, was there no way out? Was there no choice left but to give in? Desperation weighed on him like an anchor pulling him deeper into the abyss. The dark tendrils snaked around him, crawling through his illusions of joy, searching for his most profound fears, ready to feast on his every woe and insecurity. He could feel the sharp claws of sadness digging into him, threatening to pull him down into eternal night. Despite the oppressive weight that pressed against him, a small flicker of defiance remained, however faint. Ben fought against it, calling upon every memory of happiness he still held close, every game played, every sunny day spent laughing with friends, every story told around a cozy fire. He took a deep breath, gathering the remnants of laughter, friendship, and love. It was as if he were holding on to a fragile thread made of light, weaving those moments of joy into a protective shield around his heart. No, he suddenly yelled into the vast emptiness. His voice rippled through the thick darkness, surprising even himself. I won't join you. But the shadows only grew bolder, chuckling mournfully as if pushing back against his defiance, as if they found his spirit to toy with. Their whispers turned into growls, embodying a churning maelstrom of sorrow, anger, and despair. He fought back with the fierce bravery of a knight defending his castle. I won't give up, he yelled again, more firmly this time. Yet, the shadows answered back, binding him tighter in their weighty grasp. Each attempt to escape was met with more pressure, a tightening around him that felt like chains pulling him down into the depths of a dark pit from which he could not escape. But in his heart, his courage sparked anew. He understood now that he could not just fight the shadows, he had to remember the light. The shadows did not want his surrender, they craved his spirit. They needed his very essence to thrive in darkness, to add more sorrow to their eternal collection. Ben realized with a mix of horror and determination that he could not let them win. Help us! The voices cried out around him, and for the first time, Ben heard the sheer agony woven into those words. They were a plea not just for themselves, but for him as well. He understood them now. The shadows were reminders of a horrible fate, warning him of what awaited should he succumb to despair. His heartbeat quickened. They were strong, but so was he. With every ounce of his energy, he began recalling stories of bravery and hope, of times when his heart soared high among the clouds. He thought of his friend, Tommy, with his goofy smile, and how they would laugh so hard they'd roll on the grass, breathless. Those memories pushed the shadows back, even if just a little. He thought of the day he and his sister built a tree fort, the thrill of the climb, the laughter ringing through the air. That day had felt endless, bright, and warm, unlike this chilling void surrounding him now. Your darkness can't have me, Ben shouted, his voice stronger with each word. The shadows shuddered, writhing like snakes, momentarily taken aback by his defiance. Yet, they quickly recovered, growing more aggressive, clambering over each other to reach him. Their darkness felt like a thick fog wrapping around his mind, trying to pull him down into despair, but Ben pushed each memory of joy forward like a shield against their malevolence. In that moment, he discovered a small, bright flicker within himself, a spark that refused to die out. You can't have my spirit, he cried out defiantly, and he felt warmth welling inside, a fire lit by determination and hope. Even though the shadows tightened their hold on him, he could feel the faintest sense of light beginning to push through them. For an echoing moment, he let loose a laugh, real, joyful laughter that rang like metallic bells through the dark chamber. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if startled by this sudden burst of light. It was as if they were momentarily blinded by the power of his spirit refusing to be snuffed out. But even as he fought back, Ben realized the truth of his situation. The room didn't simply want his surrender, it wanted his soul. It intended to swallow him whole, bury him among the countless spirits it had already trapped in its wicked grasp. He felt a cold shiver dance around him, instinct giving way to a dawning fear. The depths of his reality twisted as he grappled with the nightmarish truth. He felt the cold darkness wrapping around him as he grasped for anything to hold on to save himself from becoming just another lost whisper in this world of shadows. A bolt of terror flew through him as the laughter of the shadows became a glorious, haunting cacophony. "Help us! Don't join them!" The voices beckoned, filled with longing and despair, melding and merging into a single scream of hopelessness as the shadows surrounded him tighter. Their grip surged, trying to crush the light he held inside, stealing his laughter and turning it into cries of sorrow. But even as despair pressed against him, he understood that the shadows could not take him without his consent. "I am not yours. I am Ben," he shouted, echoing into the wailing void, pulling on every ounce of his strength, fighting to break free of the hellish hold. But the shadows were relentless. They were a tidal wave crashing against him, a dreadful force that refused to be silenced. They surrounded him in layers as thick as stone, pushing his memories further away, plunging deeper into a chilling abyss. Moments stretched on like hours, and suddenly, he felt a strange peace overshadowing his turmoil. The playful laughter of children slipped through his mind, fading ever so slightly. With a heart full of dread, he felt the chilling surrender take him like an icy hand closing around his heart. He realized he would be cast aside into the depths with the rest of the forsaken souls if he couldn't break free. "I won't be another lost spirit," he shouted defiantly, heart racing as he became ever more entangled. With the last bit of strength he had, he fought against the pull of darkness, focusing 100% of everything inside him on holding onto the memories of laughter, of light, of friends who loved him. But much to his horror, he felt the darkness unfurling, ready to wrap him in its suffocating arms. "Help us! You can still choose!" The voices begged, wailing in horrified unison, a symphony of hopeless desperation beneath layers of shadows. Ben understood. They had once believed they could escape, too. "No, I refuse to let you take me," he cried out just as the darkness clamped down upon him. The last traces of hope shriveled, darkness enveloping him as he sank further into despair. In those final moments, he let out a breath of realization. "I won't join you," he declared. But the shadows only roared with triumph, swallowing his defiance whole. In mere instants, he was cut off from light, his cries melding into a piercing scream as cold tendrils coiled tighter around his very being. A throbbing pain surged through his mind as he felt everything fade away, the memories, the laughter, the spark of hope, all twisted into nothingness. The last bits of Ben flickered out, leaving behind only the echo of laughter trapped, consumed in darkness. The shadows reveled in their ghastly victory, thrilled by another soul to haunt the endless depths of their despair. They melded his essence into the swirling void, crafting yet another shadow to dance in the dark, mocking the living world outside. And as twilight fell once more, it remained unknowing of the horrors hidden within. The room awaited, ready and hungry for the next unguarded soul to stumble into its unholy embrace.